All right, let's bring back in our guest, still with us to discuss, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Bob Bianchi. Bob, I got to tell you, Lori Shaver did not come across in the trial as a very nice person. It's even possible she may have been trying to frame her own daughter and her ex-lover for this murder, which is certainly not a good thing. I wasn't quite expecting the maximum life in prison. I thought there might be some lower number. The minimum would have been 25 to life. I thought maybe somewhere in 30, 40 years, opportunity for parole. I was a bit surprised. Yourself?
You know, Michael, judges are funny. You know, you never know which, you could literally go across a courtroom, a hallway, and a judge would sentence the same case to something differently. But I think there are some aggravating factors here. And I think basically the evidence of prior, in the judge's mind, potentially domestic abuse that was going on here, the fact that she was living the second life, making believe she was still having contact with him, the fact that she had him buried underneath a concrete pit, got married, and was literally living with the dead husband, underneath the concrete. The fact that, listen, with all these cases, so many that I've dealt with, the tragedy that now the child lose both a mother and a father, the judge may have considered all aggravating factors, as we would call it, to move the sentencing to the higher range. But I think that from a legal point of view, you were right. I mean, a judge could go lower and a judge could give the maximum. I don't think there was anything the judge here that did that would warrant a reversal on appeal, however.
Yeah, it was interesting because I thought there were some, you talked about the aggravating, I thought there were some mitigating factors. She clearly was a victim of abuse. Now, she dished out some of her own, but again, I just hate this idea that we hold that against women at times when they're being abused and they do fight back. It's like, oh, they're doing the abusing too. I'm not sure that was the case here. It's possible that this killing was the result of abuse, meaning he might have been abusing her at the time, and that's how she lashed out. Also, there was a credible, or I guess the jury found it not credible, her daughter claiming she came into court and told this jury she was the one that shot her. Now, the jury rejected that, so I don't know how much weight the judge might give that, but what do you make of mitigating factors? This idea that we see it over and over again, where the women are being abused and they act out, but doesn't seem to be a factor, very much of a mitigating factor in sentencing.
Well, I do believe that if the judge found there was credible evidence of abuse, while it may not have risen to the level of a defense, a lot of people have a hard time with this concept, it would be considered a mitigating factor. But it's very possible that the judge found that this is not accurate, that she wasn't a victim of abuse, or the abuse was not something that led to the actual homicide itself. I know the judge had limited some of the evidence. He did allow a former petition that she had filed for a restraining order that she had once withdrawn, but there was also evidence that was produced in here that he was a victim of domestic abuse. What gets me nervous, I mean, we always say this, like, today's domestic violence is tomorrow's homicide. That was like in the homicide squad, a refrain we always said to one another. But we have to be very careful because sometimes people, in a prejudicial kind of way, just assume that the woman must have been a victim of abuse. The facts are determined by the jury. The facts were determined by this judge. The judge certainly didn't reference that as a mitigating factor. So I'll have to accept the judge didn't find it as a mitigating factor.
All right, still with me, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Bob Bianchi. Bob, I just want to first get your reaction to that jailhouse phone call. We see it time and time and again. These things don't necessarily work in the favor of anyone who's on these calls. I'm not sure this one was damaging in a number of ways, but at the end of the day, what do you make of this phone call between father and daughter?
First, full disclosure, Chris Gramaccioni from Monmouth County Prosecutor. I worked with him as a prosecutor when I was in Morris County under Governor Christie's administration. Fine lawyers, no question about it. But here's the thing, Michael, the first thing you tell, and I'm sure the lawyers did, is don't talk over the phones. The phone lines are recorded. They're taped. Anything you say can be used against you. And what I saw there, and I think these DUI fatalities are tragic because she didn't go out there that day to kill somebody. But what I see there is an unremorseful person where I am going to blow up on a poster board for opening statements and closing statements the phrase, why did this have to happen to me? And I'm going to answer her question because you decided to go out and drink, and you decided to go out and bar hop, and you decided to get into a car when you could have called an Uber, or you could have gotten a ride home, or you could have called your nice father that's on the phone there with the jail. You could have done a million different things, but you chose to do that and destroyed the lives of these people. So there's the answer to your question, why did this happen to me? This is a very bad statement in my mind. They shouldn't be talking over those phone lines, and this is exactly the reason why. Now, there's a blink here, Michael. There's a blink. I'm sure you saw it when the father said you're going to have to do time. Let me tell you what that means to me from behind the scenes, having to deal with this now as a defense lawyer. That means, in my opinion, respectfully, when they spoke to the defense lawyers saw the facts of the case, and they basically said, you killed a bride on her wedding day. It doesn't get any worse than something like that. You were an unsympathetic defendant. You were under the influence. You were speeding. Your conduct clearly meets the definition of reckless. You were going to jail. Here's the thing. The question is for how long? There's not going to be a trial here. They're already trying to work out a plea deal in the case. That's what I read in that father's conversation there.
Fair enough. I think there might not be a plea deal. It's a very high-profile case, so there might not be a plea deal. But what I think, and I'll get your opinion on this, what they know, and you know one of the attorneys, it seems like at least he thinks he's got a very high-powered, it sounds like he has a high-powered defense team. This is going to be one long sentencing. Right, what they're going to try to do in this trial, they know she's not getting out. She faces from 3 to 85 years in prison based on all the charges. Now, some of them may, submerge with the others, so it may be a little bit less, but from 3 to 85 right now. He says he thinks she'll do less, maybe even significantly less than 15. I'm not so sure. What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, Michael, you brought up a really good point here. Just to pause for a second. Yes, I agree. As a prosecutor, I would not be giving these guys any kind of level of a generous plea offer at all. So we'll start there. But they are working the plea angle in the case. Do I think that when you're looking at 3 to 85 years, I don't know the sentencing code down there. I don't know all the facts and circumstances. But again, like the other case, we're talking about aggravating and mitigating circumstances here. And a judge is going to be weighing a high-profile case where a bride on the best day of their lives was taken away and the husband is now wifeless, and all the tragedy and all the trauma. And then I hate to keep emphasizing this, but when you go to her complete lack of remorse and her only caring about herself, from what we've heard right now on these calls, I don't think that she's going to garner any sympathy from the judge. So to the extent, in my mind, possible, there's going to be an upward or an aggravating departure. In other words, more than the 15 years that we're talking about, in my mind.
All right, fair enough. Just one for full disclosure, she did suffer from, struggle with years of alcohol dependence as a young lady, depression and anxiety. So those will certainly be a part of the trial on some level. All right, let's bring back in our guest. Well, that's criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Bob Bianchi, to discuss. Bob, first and foremost, I want to talk about that leap over the bench. He was charged with attempted murder. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I mean, the judge before he pled to that case, the judge actually took the stand, and she testified very clearly that she was in fear for her life. So first and foremost, regarding the charge of attempted murder, where do you stand on that?
Michael, you're going to think this is kind of crazy. I'm going to tell you, I think attempted murder as a prosecutor is one of the most difficult offenses to prove. Because in that you have to prove that the conduct was purposeful or intentional, and that it was your actual intention to ensure the death of that person, as opposed to assault or, some other reason. So I literally have seen prosecutors try cases where somebody gets shot in the chest, but the jury struggles with whether or not the purpose was to actually kill the person, as opposed to a lesser offense like aggravated assault. So the lawyers in this case have been apoplectic about the idea that the facts here, while bad, and while there's a lot of laws that were violated, did not rise to that level to show that this person had the purpose to actually kill her, as opposed to the purpose of harming her. So I don't have a problem so much with the idea, and I guess prosecutors eventually agreed on that one. We'll park it, but you're going to plead to the rest.
Yeah, fair enough. And here's the other thing, and I want folks to understand. Anyone, we've been in the system a long time. You're a former prosecutor. This idea of a defendant not being transported, it's not really that odd in the system if you're in it every day, isn't it? I mean, tell us how these things happen.
What do you mean by not being transported? I apologize.
Well, so this case was supposed to be sentenced today, but it was postponed because he wasn't transferred from the prison where he's being kept to the county courthouse where he was going to be sentenced. And I'm going to say this, in my experience, it's not that odd. I mean, it happens from time to time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's a million reasons why it could be a lockdown. It could be a situation with somebody's ill. It could be that maybe he got involved in another assault. I have seen defendants do some very creative things so as not to be sentenced. Now, we don't know it specifically when I'm here, but Michael, you are 1,000% correct. I mean, I can't count how many times I've been ready to try a case and the jury's being impaneled and the jury's been picked and you're ready to go, and all of a sudden the defendant isn't in the courtroom, or the defendant hasn't been dressed dressed properly and be given the clothes, or something happens and the defendant is sick and isn't there, or isn't able to assist in their defense. So you're right, it's not uncommon.
Yeah, I just wanted folks to understand that this stuff does happen. Sometimes orders just don't make it to where they need to get to, or somebody forgets, or something gets lost. Things happen. In this case, he pled guilty, but mentally ill. I want to get your thoughts on that plea deal. It really practically, as far as sentencing is concerned, has no effect on the sentencing, but it might have an effect while he's incarcerated in terms of if they can show the judge that he in fact had some mental illness, he will get some treatment while in prison. He certainly has schizophrenia and needs to be medicated. So I have about 30 seconds, Bob, quickly.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. It's about how he's going to do his time, not if he's going to do his time. And so I guess they've decided that is a better place for him to be and for him to be rehabilitated. I will say this, during the course of his sentencing, he sounded pretty logical to me and didn't be suffering from any kind of mental disease or defect to do what it is that he did. But nevertheless, that's why they did do it, for how he's going to serve his time.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Bob Bianchi, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Great stuff tonight. Truly appreciate it. We'll see you again real soon, Bob.